All right, what up, you heathens? Welcome back to the Raging Atheist. I'm your boy Nakasuchi. I have PigPuncher on. I have Ali. I'm a happy dude. I get to talk politics 2 nights in a row, and they're gonna try to convert me into socialism, and we're gonna have a conversation about politics. I'm super excited. What's up, Ali?
Hey, so I am super excited, not in the least because this is a bit of a personal stream for me. As those of you in Pig's community know, which by the way, welcome to all of you. Pig actually is the one who got me into YouTube, effectively. He and I started to get to know each other when I was still getting over my severe anemia from the celiacs, which I've talked about extensively here. And I was trying to pull my husband out of the alt-right pipeline. And so back then he was, down at right 10K subs ish. Though I watched him before that, back when he was doing Minecraft stuff. And like he used to do call-in streams all the time, to the point where he'd exhaust himself. Quite frankly, like it would get piled on and piled on, and there was just this sort of storyline that evolved of hey, is the person who's trying to pull her husband out of the pipeline going to come on again? And so Pig and I ended up becoming friends because of that. He ended up making me a mod on his Discord and later on an admin. And so I did a lot of work for him there and eventually helped out with call-in streams myself as the person pulling people in instead of the one talking his ear off all the time. And, when I got started on Collective U, Pig was the first collaborator. And he introduced me to Surus, who introduced me to Knock. And, getting with Knock and working on the moderation and stuff here kind of helped me to build some of my own fan base a little bit and to kind of help to bridge the two communities that I've been a part of. So having kind of the two most influential people here, right alongside, like, again, Surus was kind of the person who bridged between the two and is still one of my closest friends. Having both of them here is kind of huge for me. So I'm super excited. Welcome to the folks who know me from PigPuncher's community as Aaliyah Kai S. And welcome to our native fan base who came here to hang out. So tonight's stream is going to be interesting. We have one major rule in the side chat, by the way. Don't use slurs. Our mods are very, very good at picking them out and getting rid of them. We aren't going to care very much about swearing. Like YouTube's starting to crack down on it a little bit, but we didn't expect this to be monetized anyway because let's face it, we're talking socialism and communism. So like
Yeah,
we're going to get demonetized.
I pretty much decided it's gonna be like impossible to go PG-13 with me. So
Edited content we can try, dang it.
I tried today. I failed miserably.
So, Pig has some crossover with the community, but he might be new to a few folks here. So, Pig, feel free to introduce yourself and what you're here to talk about.
All right, so my name is PigPuncher. I would like to start off by saying it is a Minecraft reference, and I'm not joking about that. I came up with this name when I was 10 years old, and I punched a pig in Minecraft. And the name just kind of stuck, and I kept going with it. I established a brand, so I haven't changed it. It's not about punching cops or anything. But I make leftist political content. Every once in a while, I'll make like a prepared edited video, and those do pretty well. But I'm mostly known for my streams where I cover all sorts of political topics, and I do a lot of debates. And I'm not super huge on YouTube. I think I'm like at 19K, but if you've heard of me, then you probably know all this. But if you haven't, I also do dabble in atheism stuff. I am an atheist. I've been thinking about trying to pick a fight with the flat earthers. I kind of want to debate flat earthers quite a bit as well. And yeah, that's it.
Are you having some trouble with your audio? Because folks are saying you're echoing a bit.
Oh, am I echoing? I shouldn't be, unless it's possible.
It sounds like your gain is turned up to like max.
No, it's using, hold on a second. How do I sound now?
Way better. Yeah, it was using your webcam mic, wasn't
my
it?
Webcam on by default, yeah.
That's dumb. All right, there we go. Thank you, chat, for pointing that out.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, I don't know what this program is all about. It's not Discord, so my Zoomer ass doesn't know what to do.
It's called Zoom. You're a Zoomer. You should know this, Pig. God.
I've never used this program before. Alrighty.
So as far as atheist content and stuff, one of the special things about this channel is just like Surus's channel, we focus mainly on the political side of atheism, so we tend to take down the Abrahamics primarily, because, well, let's face it, the Christians are trying to legislate their religion, and that's a problem for pagans and atheists both. So what's kind of unique about this channel is there's a pagan co-host. I know that you knew this about me, but maybe your fan base didn't. I'm a Hellenist. So that's something that's kind of cool. We talk about things from, like, you know, a pagan and a atheist perspective when we review videos and things of that nature, like when we work on things together, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's probably good to have a kind of a second opinion from someone who isn't an atheist.
Yeah, and she's a lot smarter than I am, so it helps in that regard.
You're always so nice to me, Knock.
I mean, I call a spade a spade. No, like I deal with a lot of extreme Christians mainly. I have a lot of enemies out there, and yeah, some of them get happy when I unban them. Victor's a cool dude. As long as you're good, Victor, you'll be cool. So yeah, it came to the point pretty much we had to really crack down on my side chat just because of all the extreme Christians coming in.
Yeah, we had people dropping. We had people dropping N bombs left and right. We had people dropping the F bomb, the F slur left and right. We've handled. If you're familiar with the NIFB, Knock.
Yeah.
Knock was part of the Pumpkin Posse. He actually has been threatened, and his daughter has been threatened by the NIFB because he took them down for their anti-LGBT hatred. So he's a hardcore ally in that regard. We've also done some interesting mental health streams. We did one on trans, we did one on autism, we did one on self-harm, and our last one was actually on eating disorders, and I got to talk about mine.
The last word on atheism, I announced it this morning for all y'all in the chat that wasn't here this morning. Ben the Baptist went down last night. He's gone off of YouTube. So hooray, another victory against the NIFB. But we're here to talk politics tonight. I'm super stoked.
Yes, we are. All right, so Knock, this is basically Pig and I versus you for once. Your moderator is not on your side completely.
Yeah.
So Pig, do you want to start with a pitch, or Knock, do you want to start with your objections to what you understand, or even just your understanding of socialism, communism, etc.?
I'll just real quick, and then we'll let Pig give his pitch. I'll just kind of give my perspective because I have a very unique perspective. So, for one, I am Native American and Irish, so I'm half blood or half breed, and I was raised very Southern conservative, very racist, very homophobic, very, very Southern Baptist. That started to change in my late teenage years. I started to become more liberal. 9/11 happened, and at first I was a staunch gung-ho nationalist right there with everybody else. Let's go to war, let's kill all of them. But that quickly changed for me a lot sooner than it did for a lot of other people. I went to the left. As I have aged through since then, I have progressively went farther left to where most people when they age seem to, where the old adage is you get more conservative as you grow older. I get farther and farther left. So I'm basically a social progressive, a social democrat. I lean towards socialism, but I have reservations about if America's ready for all-out socialism. So that's kind of my perspective, and then we'll let you give your pitch.
Yeah, I guess I'll go off of that. For the most, I'm sorry if I'm a little, if I am not able to articulate my words perfectly. I just got off a 4-hour stream.
I understand.
Yeah, so
I was telling him that when you were coming in, because he was like, "Oh, we've got about 15 minutes," and I'm like, "Yeah, he's still streaming right now. He's arguing with somebody."
Yeah, I work my fingers to the bone. So socialism can be kind of hard to pin down an exact definition on. There's a lot of different economic theories that are based off of socialism, but generally, socialism is all about the publicly owned means of production, or the socially owned means of production, while capitalism is about the privately owned means of production. So you have a one or a group of people who have the ownership of all of the means of production, referring to factories, land, resources, things like that. Things needed to produce goods, and those are owned privately by a certain person. So you have someone who owns the land that like let's use a factory as an example. In capitalism, you have one or a few people who own the land the factory is on, the machines, the building, the raw materials used to make the product. They own the product until it's sold, and they employ workers to work under them for whatever wage they decide to give them, and that is capitalism. At a base level, socialism is the publicly owned or socially owned means of production, where instead of there being one or a few people who own all of this, the means of production, instead it is a variety, or the workers in general. I'm sure you've heard of co-ops before. Mondragon is the most popular co-op there is. It's one of the biggest as well. The idea is that every worker has a slice of the pie, essentially. They all have the same or equivalent stake in the company. They have like the same amount of shares. They're paid appropriately. There is no CEOs or anything like that. There are managers, but the people who have higher positions of power in these businesses or co-ops, they are democratically elected to those positions. And they don't necessarily get paid a ton more. They don't own those workers necessarily. They, for the most part, are elected because they know how to manage things, and they probably know better and can keep the cogs rolling. And that's a basic idea, as best as I can word at the moment, of what socialism is on a very bare bones level.
Well, and I could give an example of an actual co-op business that functions in my own state. There's actually a grocery store called Winco Foods. They're a direct competitor to Costco. They're kind of a West Coast thing. We've got them all over Washington, Oregon, and in the northern parts of California. But they are entirely employee owned. And the longer you work there, the more of the internal stock you get. And when you quit or retire, you have to sell it. So every single person who works there is a stockholder, and they own more stock the longer they've worked there. And they have a model very similar to what Pig was talking about. They have a board of directors, but again, that board of directors is voted for by the employees and not private stockholders. It's all completely contained within the company itself. And it's actually one of the best and cheapest places to shop. And from what I've heard, most of the Wincos, people there say that they were much happier than they were working even union labor comparatively.
Yeah, when you're able to democratically elect the people who make the decisions about how things are done as a worker, you feel like you have a more of a say in the company. Like you're an actual cog in the machine that runs that company or co-op.
You're a stakeholder.
Yeah, you're a stakeholder as well. And there have actually been studies and whatnot that have shown that the workers of co-ops are overwhelmingly happier than your average worker who's having to exist in the wagey cagey, as we call it.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Like I would be completely for a co-op system. I think that it would help not only worker morale, but it would kind of rein in the bosses and make them more responsible to the worker. And I'm definitely for like the worker. And that's been kind of my progression farther left because I've worked in a lot of factory jobs. I live up here in the Rust Belt. Here in Michigan, it's all about cars and automobiles, and I've done those jobs pretty much off and on my whole life, and it's a messed up system to where it's really hard to advance. There's this in and out system of temps in and out. I'm a complete believer that capitalism has failed. I'm anti-capitalist, so I should kind of put that out there. I'm somewhat weird with my politics. What I think the problem is, though, is selling it to, I call them Trumpers, but it's just like a broad term for people that aren't interested in truth or hearing any kind of truth that when you present it to them. So like people down in North Carolina that I grew up with, they just hear the word socialism and they're completely turned off. It's anti-American. It's this, it's that. They paint Bernie Sanders as a socialist and he's not even a socialist. So the problem would be selling that, and that's kind of where I fall off of it. I don't think that it can really be sold to those people in particular, or people that just aren't interested in political theory. And most of those people would be the actual workers. Like you see them against unions, and it's like, unions would be in their best interest, and yet more and more of them are against you. I see it all over here in Michigan. It's actually insane. It's, I worked in a factory, and you couldn't even say the word union. You'd be fired automatically.
Yep.
I mean, just straight insane. So like,
not only that, but they'll actually, if your coworker hears you saying it, they'll get rewarded for turning you in.
Yeah, actually, I worked for Target when I was just out of high school. It was one of when I talk about working 2 jobs all the way through college, that's one of, like, just before I got into my bachelor's program, that was the job that I did over the summer. And they had training propaganda that basically told us that the shift swap board would have to go away if we unionized. They talked about the competitive wages. They talked about all the things you love so much about Target. And they talked about getting gift cards if you turned in a union person, like to not talk to them, to walk away from them, all that sort of thing.
I mean, I am encouraged to see, like, the youth movement really seems to be farther left, the majority of the youth in this country anyway. And it seems like they are more pro-worker and pro-union. So, and that would be, I guess, my argument would, like, it would seem like the natural progression would be, like, maybe argue for more stronger unions and then progress more into a socialist hybrid capitalist system, and just kind of not tell another word I use lovingly is the Neanderthals, just kind of what's going on, because as long as you don't say the word socialism, they seem to be for the actual policy.
Well, that was interesting. There was a survey done a while back about the Affordable Care Act versus Obamacare, which people here obviously know are the same thing. But there was a survey done where they're like, do you support the Affordable Care Act? And then another question was, do you support Obamacare? And like 25% of people supported Obamacare, but 57%, and these were mostly people who identified as Republicans, supported the Affordable Care Act, even though they were the same thing. Real quick, though, I need to cut everybody off for a second. We've got a super chat from Kent Hovind CPA, $2. The Chiefs are the best team in playoffs. Fight me.
Yeah, he's a huge Chiefs fan.
Amazing.
I put it out there that, I think the Ravens might be a little better, but we will see in the playoffs. And don't kill me, Kent Hovind CPA. So yeah, like in the whole socialism thing, because I was like doing 100 million things before the stream started.
I think we need to give Pig a second to respond to what we were
I was just saying it might be more interesting because I'm kind of farther apart when it comes to actual communism, because I'm almost there on the socialism thing. Like my reservations is like people are afraid of the word and not the actual political theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from there. I'm sure you've heard of this, but this is basically just the result of a shit ton of propaganda that's been shoved down Americans' throats, or just people in the West in general, for a very long time. It was called the Red Scare. There's a reason why conservatives here in America called Obama a communist during, like, I think it was like Mitt Romney called Obama a communist. Like, it's very difficult. We call it when someone is sort of, well, I call it breadpilling, but to get someone on board with socialism, or at the very least to make them susceptible to it, we call it class consciousness. You give someone class consciousness, you make them understand that no, there's not lower class and middle class and upper class. There's working class, there's the capitalist ruling class. There's the sharks and there's the minnows, if you want to give it like a capitalism analogy. And once you make people understand that it's us versus them, essentially, generally they're more likely to get on board. But with old people who've just been like had Red Scare propaganda shoved down their throat their entire lives, I hate to say it, but my take has always been that you just kind of have to wait for them to.
Yeah, well, I get exactly what you're saying, because I think that's initially, and I was kind of discussing that with Ali before you showed up, is I think it's going to take like a few generations at least to get that fear away, and you have to work at it, and it comes with education, and it seems to be happening already. Like you're considerably younger than me, and you're farther left. I mean, that to me is a great sign, and like I was talking about. Henry VIII, when he changed England from being Catholic to Protestant, it took a good 40 years. But in 40 years, it happened. They were no longer Catholic, they were Protestant, and in fact, they were extreme Protestant, and they thought Catholics were as bad as witches. So, I mean, history has shown that it can happen, but it takes a cultural shift, and that's what we really need to do is break through that barrier of misinformation. You know, like
Yeah.
when Bernie Sanders admits to being a socialist when he's not, because he knows the right's going to call him that anyway, and then they go beyond socialist and call him a communist. That actually does damage because he's not a socialist. So, you know, he's adding to that misinformation, and I'm a Bernie supporter, so you know, putting that out there. But I'm very open about that. My audience
Yeah, I love Bernie.
love it or hate it. So.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. My take, I have a bit of a different idea here. Generally, I do think that young people are typically more progressive. I'm 20 years old. And I will admit that I had a bit of a reactionary phase. I went down what we call the alt-right rabbit hole. I was a pretty far-right reactionary.
Yeah, mentioned that. I'm interested in that. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so the issue that we're seeing right now is essentially a rise in fascism, as well as a rise in leftism at the same time. The reason for this is that late-stage capitalism isn't working for anybody. If you go down the list of issues the average person, mostly young people, are facing right now, generally young people feel like they're very disconnected from society. They feel like they have a lot of monetary issues. They aren't able to get a good job. School's very tough. Just any issue you can list. These can be addressed in different ways. Fascism addresses them, and so does leftism, but they give different reasons for these things. Fascism would tell them the reason why they have issues getting a job and with money is because of immigration and brown people coming to white countries and diluting the gene pool, shit like that. And they would say that the reason why they're having why they feel disconnected is because of modernity and they're having trouble getting into a relationship because women and feminism is bad and all that. So they can be appealed to from there. And we're seeing that happen. I mean, you've seen the anti-SJW YouTube, everything blow up.
So it can be very easily said that fascists basically blame groups of people, whereas, you know, socialism and communism kind of expose the structure of systems and institutions and such.
And socialism or leftism specifically acknowledges all those same problems, but instead of blaming immigration, instead of blaming immigration, they blame the capitalist ruling class for exploiting the workers. Instead of blaming feminism, they blame things like toxic masculinity, and feminism is the solution. It's basically the same set of issues that everyone is having to deal with right now, but fascism and leftism give solutions. It's just a matter of who gets to them first. And I think that as the older generations die out, young people they're moving further to the extremes. They aren't staying in the middle because late stage capitalism, centrism isn't working for them. It's just a matter of each side taking as many people and sort of influencing as many people as possible. And that's what I do. I try to give as many young people class consciousness as possible to pull them more towards leftism before fascism gets them like it got me.
Yeah, and I have covered like youth movements. I covered a youth movement by MMA Jenkins. I need to get back into that side of those videos. But yeah, the youth movements it can take very drastic turns as I looked at those numbers. And I did do a lot of work on the alt-right and how the alt-right were sucking in a lot of especially 16 to 19-year-old white young men. And it was during that whole anti-SJW blow up. I'm staunchly against that. So yeah, like that fascinates me, and to hear that you actually went there and then came out of it and now fight against that's actually pretty inspiring to me, because I actually stopped watching a lot of atheists back then because they became anti-SJW.
Yeah, we have a super chat from Comrade Courtney, $4.99. Thank you, Comrade. PigPuncher's rhetoric and argument skills have significantly improved since I started watching him nearly 7 months ago. Good job, Comrade.
Thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you think that I'm improving, because I personally don't see it in myself. I know I must have, because I've been doing this for 8 months, but yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that I'm getting better. I think with experience, I'll get better at articulating myself and arguing.
Hey, Gaelic Knox is in the chat. Hey, Gaelic. Gaelic Knox is the one who did that adorable artwork that you guys were all commenting on earlier in the introduction. The one with Knox sitting, looking, pouting. She's a fantastic artist. It's well worth commissioning her if you ever get a chance to catch one of her streams when she does her open commissions.
Yeah, my name Nakasuchi, it means little bear.
So that's where the sort of furry joke that you saw in there comes from. Is it's him being an adorable little bear.
Oh damn! I'm pretty sure if Chad Boris is in chat, he'll be happy about that. He is a I don't think he's a furry, but he always identifies with like giant bears. He likes grizzly bears.
Oh, he's got bear spirit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Nox's name means little bear. Mine means dogfish lady. So if you ever see Callan calling me dogfish lady, that's why. Because it literally, like, my name Alakide means like lady of the dogfish house.
Okay. So, yeah, it's a cool name. Yeah, I mean, it's oh, is there something I was gonna say? This is what I get for streaming for 4 hours, then coming on to another live stream. Yeah, no, as for like my political journey, I get a lot of people who are like, man, I can't believe we went through that. And it's like, I don't feel like it's that crazy because it's such a normal thing. I feel like at this point, it's been very normalized. The anti-SJW YouTube community is massive. People are being pulled into it because it appeals to a lot of young people's presuppositions about a lot of different ideologies, feminism primarily. And so a lot of people are being pulled down there, and I think they can come back from it. I would actually argue that the majority of leftists online at the moment were at some point reactionaries and got pulled out of it. I don't think it's that unique, but
I watched a lot of the atheists that I was watching back then were leftists, and then I watched as they just went farther and farther right, and it got to the point I'm like, unsub, you know, just stop watching.
There was actually some really brilliant work done. I think it was by the New York Times, which is strange because, you know, the New York Times is they're a bit on the conservative side for certain things, where they talked about how Breitbart picking up articles on Gamergate and being pro Gamergate sort of led to a lot of the training of YouTube's algorithm to link gaming content with alt-right content, which even I've noticed some of the gamers that I watch that aren't alt-right, their videos, because it's in the gaming section of the algorithm, you'll start getting recommendations for like No Bullshit. You'll get recommendations for, you know, the Golden One was coming up every so often, which was surprising, but it does.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, if you were one of those people who watched PewDiePie, you know, lots and lots of, you know, Nazi sort of supporters, and I'm going to use that actual term because there are, you know, a few JQers in the list of people that come up with his recommendations in the algorithm, you can get pulled down that pipeline, and it starts off as really, really tame. Like, some of those reactionaries are very, very, very tame. You know, they'll start talking about how it's ridiculous these days that, you know, they'll pull up a clip of somebody asking you to use gender neutral pronouns to address the audience or something, and they'll make a big deal out of that. And, you know, it'll sound to the average viewer who doesn't kind of understand the intricacy of the issue, it'll sound like, oh, okay, that person's kind of being a little bit extreme, asking people not to use, you know, like he and she when addressing the audience because they're sensitive, You know, it sounds reasonable if you don't understand certain issues, but then you get deeper and deeper into it and you start getting into conspiracy theories, and because you've been trained to accept these other things, you start to see that person as an authority. And that's what started to happen to my husband. Like, part of the reason why I ended up getting to know PigPuncher in the first place was when my husband and I were out on a walk, he started asking me about the Great Replacement. And I was sitting here going, my husband is one of the most progressive people I've ever met. Like, he was at one point, you know, he figured out he was gender fluid later, but he was at one point, he thought he was trans. And so, like, he was on hormones and stuff when he and I first met. Later on, again, he figured out that he was fluid and that he just liked the clothing aspect and didn't necessarily want his body to match. But, like, this is the kind of person he is. And now he's starting to ask me about the Great Replacement, like, what's going on here? And it turned out he'd been pulled into that pipeline, and he was watching people like No Bullshit and, like, you know, Fuentes was on the list, Southern was on the list. Like, there were a bunch of people, and, you know, a lot of them were gamers. That also did political stuff, but there were a shitload of these people that, like, were feeding him these opinions.
Yep. I definitely it's really complicated explaining how the alt-right rabbit hole works. I used to just chalk it up mostly to the algorithm. It was never entirely, because it's a mix of things.
I mean,
but
Nakabee did a really good series on it. Like he like in his first episode on that series.
PewDiePie,
yeah, the PewDiePie pipeline. He talked about the algorithm and the way that it hooked in.
I think that's probably the most comprehensive takedown of the alt-right pipeline that there is. I would probably, if someone wanted to know about it, I would probably send them that video and the sequel. Particularly, it's really complicated because let's say you're just watching some random gaming video, and you see in the recommended a video about Zoe Quinn or
Anita Sarkeesian.
Anita Sarkeesian. Yeah, just some video about them. I mean, it's not necessarily the algorithm purposefully leading people to that, but it's the metadata. The metadata of some random gaming Let's Play is probably going to be the same metadata or very similar to that of like an anti-SJW talking about Anita Sarkeesian or Zoe Quinn. So it's almost just the way that the YouTube algorithm is built. You're more likely to stumble upon that content, and once you stumble upon it,
a lot of that had to do, and a lot of that did have to do with Breitbart, because Breitbart published a whole bunch of pro Gamergate content, and a lot of Let's Players were very into the Gamergate thing, in part because about half of them didn't understand all of the origins of it. You know, there were a number of people, especially in the early part of the movement, that thought it really was about ethics and gaming journalism and kind of got pulled along that particular route. You mentioned in your coming out of the the alt-right pipeline video that you were one of those that thought it really was about ethics and gaming journalism. You didn't realize that it was about all these other things at first.
So for me, I when I heard about it for the first time, I didn't really care. I wasn't one of those people who was like really into Gamergate when it happened. I really didn't care. I was busy playing Minecraft, and so basically, when I heard about it for the first time,
it was constantly in the background of all of the videos and stuff that you watched.
Not really. I never even saw any videos recommending it. I just heard people bring it up in Let's Plays I would watch. Like people would talk about it, and then anytime it was ever brought up, the consensus was usually like, "Yeah, gaming journalists." They're bad. And from what I heard, it was about like, from what I knew, it was about gaming journalists accepting bribes for good game reviews. That was basically what I thought. And I didn't ever really get much into politics up until, ironically enough, I did check out one of the first figures that I would watch that was actually ended up being part of the rabbit hole for me was The Amazing Atheist. But that was back like before the Gamergate stuff, or before he was getting into the anti-SJW stuff. He was just making like videos debunking people like what was his name? Jack Thompson. I think he made a couple videos on that guy because he's like a Christian who thinks that gaming is evil and shit like that. So I watched a couple of those videos, but for the most part, I didn't really get into the political stuff until 2016. And 2016 was such a weird time for everyone who was even somewhat political on YouTube. Seems like everyone was being a mouthpiece for the alt-right at the time, unless they were like a full-on lefty or like a full-on leftist, because even liberals were doing it, like liberal content creators.
Yeah, that's about when I made my first channel, and my first channel was a political, progressive channel. And I got nowhere. It was all right, no traction whatsoever. And as soon as I switched over to atheism, it was completely different.
Yeah, so this is an issue that's very, very prevalent at the moment in like leftist spaces. Or not so much now, but it used to be. So there wasn't much of a leftist or even just liberal community on YouTube prior to 2017. The two examples I can think of right off the top of my head were Milo Stewart and Riley J. Dennis. Probably know about them. They were the most popular, like overtly lefty political YouTubers out there, and yet they both got absolutely railed on by reactionaries. They were constantly having like response videos made to them where they were taken out of context and ad hommed constantly. That was what lefty stuff was on YouTube for a long time. But as of 2017 and a little onward, we're seeing progressive ideology getting popular. We're seeing BreadTube, people like ContraPoints, people like me, people like Vosh, people like Sean and Jen, H Bomber Guy, Three Arrows, just go down the list essentially. We're seeing all these figures getting popular. This wasn't a thing 4 years ago. Just wasn't a thing. This is all brand new.
Oh yeah, I would have never even known about any of y'all, and except that our communities have started to clash a little bit. I saw you for the first time on it's telling my internet is unstable.
Might have been Cirrus's stream.
Yeah, it was on Cirrus's stream. I got a weird notification telling me my internet was insecure. That never happens. I don't know what that was. But yeah, I saw you on Cirrus's stream, and I saw Vosh go on Non Sequitur show. And that's how I was like, holy shit, there is this whole lefty side of the internet now. Because I tried to get there, and I just, like I said, no traction. I probably actually started in 2015 trying, and yeah, it was just nothing. But then... so I didn't even realize that Cirrus was so left. You know, I just knew Cirrus as an atheist and as a skeptic. So when me and Allie became close, she kind of informed me of that, and I didn't even know what BreadTube was. She had to.
You were high off your ass that night,
Yeah.
and you were like, "Wait, what? Cirrus is a socialist." And I was like, yeah, like that's how he and I met, was because my friend PigPuncher introduced the two of us.
Wait, I introduced you to Cirrus?
Yeah, when I started up Collective U, you introduced me to Cirrus because you thought he might be interested. Because you had
Oh,
just
maybe
done your
I
collab
did.
with him, and you guys like had just become friends, and he had just joined the server.
Am I high? When the fuck did I meet Cirrus? I don't remember.
It was like June. It was like, I don't know if you guys had known each other prior, but June, July is when you did a collab with him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
wait
went
around
on
that
you went on
time.
his
It was
channel
a little
for a live
while
stream.
after that, and Cirrus was the one who introduced me to Knock.
Yeah, it would have been around that time, definitely. But I don't remember so much from that because I'm going to be honest, every stream that I did, it was like 900 degrees in my room. I was
Oh yeah, you were
dripping
bitching
sweat, and
about that constantly.
I was just
It's
trying
like,
to. I was just soldiering through every stream. I've blocked out basically the entire.
People bitched about your fans so much, and you were just like, "Get the hell over it!" Like the sweat is coming off of my face; you can see it.
Yeah, it's still like 78 degrees tonight in Florida. My AC is out. Unfortunately, we're getting a new one soon, but yeah, it's been living in Florida and being a streamer and not having good AC sucks. But yeah, I basically blocked out all that out of my memory, so I don't remember much of that. But yeah, I'm surprised. I thought you introduced me to Cirrus.
Nope, it was vice versa. You introduced me to Cirrus, and then Cirrus and I became friends because, well, partially because I started to get to know him because I needed to figure out kind of the pattern of his normal speech so that I could figure out how to write scripts for him for Collective U. And so we started talking fairly frequently, and then we figured out we were both poly, and so we kind of like bonded over that. And then, you know, later on, we figured out that we were in alignment on a lot of the same things politically and that sort of thing. And so we became friends slowly and personal friends. And when Nock was looking for moderators for his streams, because he had a couple of major dumpster fires and some serious drama, Cirrus ended up, like I mentioned that I had debate experience from college, like doing moderation. And so Cirrus is like, oh yeah, Allie's good people. So that's how I ended up meeting up with Nock. But yeah, you were kind of my gateway into everything. And then after I met Cirrus, Cirrus introduced me to this side of the community, which admittedly, because of the hangups with the animation and Collective U, I've gotten more involved in because Nock kind of has his shit together, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with what's been going on with the Collective U animation team.
Yeah, I still need to record those lines for you, but I'm glad I was able to
kick your butt, Pig.
Listen, I constantly I need to read those lines. I'm sorry. I've been very, very busy these last God, forever. These last few months, especially. I'm actually, like, as we speak right now, to give you an idea of how busy I am, I'm making the thumbnails for my videos that I'm going to be uploading. Because I upload daily clips from my stream, and then I stream once I run out of clips. So that's kind of my thing. But yeah, I'll record that. But I'm glad I was able to get you into this whole community. I remember you told a little bit of the story earlier, but I remember you came into my chat one night. I was doing viewer call-ins, and you came in, and I brought you on. You told me the story about your husband falling down the rabbit hole, and I gave you some advice. And I'm glad you're able to follow that advice. And it seems like you've breadpilled your husband, right?
Ish. He's kind of somewhere in the middle at this point. He's out of the like let's do the whole great replacement theory thing, but he's still cleaning up his YouTube because his YouTube is pretty deeply screwed up. Like he was in there for a lot longer than I'd realized, so he's still kind of trying to get himself out of a lot of those thinking patterns. he's not quite a communist, but I think he's back to being kind of progressive, socialist type thing. He's also a union worker, so I didn't really have to teach him anything about class consciousness because, like, he works for one of the biggest unions in the country.
Yeah,
over pretty hard by like the company that he works for in relation to union negotiations.
I have an uncle that's in a union here in my town, and he is staunchly anti-union, conservative Republican. It's kind of insane.
So one other thing about kind of backtracking a little bit to the discussion we were having about socialism, I read an interesting article on the recommendation of another bread tuber called Moderates Don't Exist. First off, have you seen that video? And second, like, have you read the article? Like, are you familiar with it?
I haven't, no, but I kind of have an idea as to what it might be about, just judging off the title.
Well, basically, the idea is that the political moderate, the sort of middle position, is actually kind of a myth that was created by a lot of the people who do the surveys because they believe in the political binary. Basically, you've got left and right. They don't recognize the social axis and the economic axis as being separate. I heard that some people add a third axis, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I heavily disagree with a binary in the political spectrum. It's really difficult to parse it out like that because there are people who are like pretty progressive socially, but then also while advocating for like pretty progressive stuff also end up being a mouthpiece for like white nationalism. Like I would say 2016 Chris Reagan, I don't think you could possibly like accurately graph his political opinions on like any type of spectrum or anything like that because it's so complicated.
Well, and that's where a lot of these surveys, the idea of the moderate came about because a lot of these surveys would ask a bunch of questions on various social issues generally, where sometimes people would have what you would be consider, left opinions. And I'm using the term left here as like Democrats. So we're talking about American politics here, things that you'd expect from the left, but you'd get some answers that you'd expect from the right. And so like what you'd end up with is sort of a mishmash of, they have a fairly extreme position, but it's some of them are right and some of them are left. So they called them moderates because they'd aggregate and average the scores. And that's how they'd figure out how many lefties, moderates, etc. existed. And so the idea of the moderate is just somebody who holds opinions on the social or the economic axis that belong to the side that isn't the majority of their opinions. So like we have a term up here, Spokane liberal. Those are liberals who are very, very strong advocates of gun rights, which a lot of liberals are not. Most people associate the Democrats with gun control, but a lot of the folks in Spokane, it's kind of a hunting town a little bit. It's a larger city and it's got a very progressive social bent, but they're very hardcore on their guns rights. And so like those people would be considered moderates, even though they're 90% progressive and just hold one conservative belief. And so the idea of the moderate comes from the fact that most people have some left and some right beliefs. They don't sit comfortably on one side or the other. And so they tried to call them an average, even though really that average doesn't actually exist.
I definitely think that moderates don't exist. I whenever someone says they're a centrist or a moderate, I kind of roll my eyes and say, okay, so you're basically a conservative. I mean, like, because the issue with political ideologies is that conservative ideas tend to be a lot stronger or prominent than liberal ideas. And by that, I mean, if you are somebody who believes racism is bad, who believes that homophobia is bad, and is just generally pretty socially progressive, but you also are like really pro-gun, chances are you're going to talk about how pro-gun you are way more than you're going to express how anti-racism, anti-homophobia you are. And so effectively you are a conservative. Really quick, can I go grab a snack from the fridge? I'll be right back in just a second. I haven't eaten.
Sure, go ahead. Like that'll give us a chance to do sort of our quick plugging and all that stuff that we do midstream. So we've got 56 people hanging out in the chat apparently, but we've only got 30 likes. Like, dislike, whatever it is you're feeling. Feed the algorithm a little bit for us. Again, thank you so much, folks from PigPuncher stream, for coming in and saying hi to us. Knock and I have been trying to set this up for quite some time, so I'm really, really glad that you guys have gotten a chance to come and hang out with us.
You're on the big screen now. Me and Pig are small now. It's because I turned my camera off.
I feel weird. So Knock, where do you sit after kind of hearing some of this stuff? Do we want to start getting into communism when Pig gets back, or like, have you learned anything? Do you find this interesting? You were talking about the pipeline, so.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated by his story because it seems like he has a similar story to mine, but it kind of took me a lot longer. And I'm also fascinated by the electronic pipeline that younger people are dealing with today. Because for me, it was just growing up in the South, walking through the woods, you'd come across a KKK meeting, and there was your fascist, and my ideology back then aligned more with those fascists than anybody else. So yeah, my progression was from fascism to well, I would, you see it all the time. I get accused of being an extreme leftist, although I think on the world stage I would be considered
Hey,
left.
that's a snack.
But when it comes to socialism, I think I'm for it in theory. But I just, as I said, I think it'll take time for us to get there. The communism thing, I'm interested in that conversation because, like, I'm for communism in theory as well. I just don't think the world is nowhere near ready for it.
I like communism, but I'm a little more agnostic on advocating for it. It's usually pretty bad optics for me to advocate for it. I feel like advocating for market socialism, which I think is probably a way more tangible goal in my lifetime. I feel like if we got Bernie elected, if that happened and he got 2 terms, it would be tangible to have some form of market socialism in America by the time I die.
And that's what I was telling Ali is I think that like Bernie's a good first step. And you're exactly right, because with communism, you talk about the bad connotations of socialism. It's amplified a 1,000-fold if you say the word communism. That's why they're now, now that Bernie is looking like he's probably going to become the front runner, you hear that word associated with him a lot more than you did before. Like I've heard communism associated with Bernie quite a bit the last couple weeks.
I wanted to backtrack a little bit to part of your story, because what's interesting about sort of your analysis of Pig's story while he was away, Pig actually was raised very liberal. He got pulled into the alt-right pipeline exclusively through that electronic means.
Yeah.
His parents are both actually fairly liberal. He's even done a stream that I got to poke him with donations for. That was fun.
And that's the thing about me too.
I hung out with them and had dinner with them. They're almost kind of libertarian, like with some socialist like leanings a little bit from the way that they were talking. But like he grew up super, super liberal, and part of his rebellion he talked about was the alt-right stuff.
Yeah, well, and that was me too, because like I was really young when we moved to North Carolina, but my dad was a liberal hippie back then. Like he was literally kicked out of the army for doing hippie shit. So like my story is really weird because I've watched myself progress because I grew up down there, so I don't really remember my time before that. I have to assume that I was raised in a somewhat liberal household, to where when we moved down to North Carolina, my dad wasn't around, it's just my stepmom. So all I had was that conservative around me. So I grew up in that. And like I said, like the connection to me really is the pipeline, right? Like how you get connected with it. Because it went from just simple, the whites and the blacks were kind of segregated back then still, to, a rebel flag on the wall, saying the N-word, getting in fights with black people, being homophobic, just worse and worse and worse. As I said, stumbling through the woods, coming across a KKK meeting, and you don't leave, you hang out and you associate because people there. So that was like my experience. It's similar, but it was just back then we didn't have the internet. It was just you grew up in it, and now they can actually reach people that didn't grow up in it and suck them in. That's kind of the scary thing.
Well, I think there should be I want to make a clarification, because it's really difficult working with all these political labels. But there's like a huge difference between Nick Fuentes. I don't know if you know who he is. He's probably the most popular neo-Nazi nowadays, really popular with young people.
Oh,
I
the
did a
Fuentes
couple
people love to
videos.
screw with Surus because Surus did a takedown of him, and so they like to
Mhm.
show
Yeah,
up
I
in
got
his
a few
chat
of the
and screw with
gropers.
him.
Yeah, the Groypers, they go after anyone who criticizes their dad. So there's a big difference between someone like him and a KKK member, and his fans would agree. I think I would call.
Oh yeah.
I think we should make like a distinction. There's like boomer fascism and there's Zoomer fascism.
All
Nick
right.
Fuentes and his ilk are the Zoomer fascists, and like a KKK meeting, like KKK old, like the old guard of like fascism, Nazis, you know, stuff like that. That would be like boomer fascism, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like they would definitely say that Nick Fuentes wasn't their type of people.
There's actually an interesting video. Hmm. I think it was Now This or maybe Vice. I'm pretty sure it was Now This did a video where an ex old KKK member, like this dude was in prison gangs and stuff like that. You can see the laser marks on his arms from where he had like swastikas and stuff tattooed off of his arms. They sat him and Nick Fuentes down together, and this guy is like, "You're a Nazi," and he's like, "I'm not a Nazi. I just think white people deserve to have their own land. I think black people should too." And this guy's like, "I was a neo-Nazi when I was in prison. What you're saying is exactly what we used to say. You're a Nazi." It was an interesting video, but unfortunately, Nick Fuentes is very good at smugly smiling and coming out of things looking good. So he comes out of that video looking pretty good in terms of
I mean, both Nick Fuentes and Sargon are very good at smugly and calmly being wrong, but being so confident and calm about it, while, you know, a lot of their opponents get angry, that, you know, they look good to their audience. Like, the alt-right is 90% optics.
And they feast off of the bad optics of their opposition. The left has always had pretty bad optics because being openly extremist is unappealing, but fascists don't act openly extremist, not openly.
No.
So when you're coming into it, it seems very reasonable. And, you know, you make fun of the people who are freaking out, and, you know, the SJWs having mental breakdowns in the street, and they're rioting and they're causing trouble. And, you know, you make fun of those, but then, you know, once you get in there, you're like, hey, you know, Jews control quite a bit of Hollywood and the media and even the government, huh? Isn't that kind of strange? Maybe we should do something about it. You know?
Oh yeah, yeah. I cover it with the NIFB. They're deeply anti-Semitic, and you're exactly right. Like, the people I knew when I was a kid down in North Carolina would just laugh at Nick Fuentes and think he was a joke. But there is a rise in it, and they do work from the shadows. Like, I was gonna have a conversation with somebody that was in a very popular alt-right movement. I don't want to give away too much, but I was talked out of it by several people, and for very good reasons, because they are so good at optics and they are so good. Like, if you aren't prepared for those conversations, you could be easily taken advantage of, and that's why I admire when I see actual leftists doing it. I admire it so much because it's a slippery slope, and you have to really understand the politics and understand the arguments that are going to be thrown at you.
So the alt-right, like you said, it strives off of being platformed by people who are unequipped to debate their ideas.
Yeah.
This is why they love Dave Rubin so much, because Dave Rubin will bring them on. Andy Worski will bring them on, even though he's a race realist now, I'm pretty sure. He'll bring these people on, these Richard Spencers, these Nick Fuentes types, and he'll have them on and they'll just express all their ideas, and they're not equipped to debate those ideas. All that's happening is those people are being platformed. They're reaching an audience that's sitting on the fence and looking for an ideology to subscribe to, and then that's how the alt-right grows. It's what they strive off of.
Yeah, and I do deal with that a lot too. Like, this age of misinformation that we live in, there's so much information out there. It's really hard to sift through what's real and what's not. And I think you're right. Like, the moment that you even claim, you know, you can claim to be for this policy or for that policy, and they'll think nothing of it. But the moment, like, you claim to be a socialist, or like the other day, like, at work, I was just joking around because I'm nowhere near a communist, but I'm like, somebody asked me, my political affiliation. I'm like, I'm 2 steps away from communism. And as I'm walking away, I hear that person whisper to another person, he said he's a communist. And I just start laughing. I'm like, I totally didn't say I was a communist, but just this fear of it. But you try to point out, like, say, Trump has a very, very extreme immigration policy, the same immigration policy that I heard from those KKK members 20 years ago, and just deaf ears. It's nowhere near the same thing in their opinion.
Yeah, there are some people that I think are unreachable. I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop eating now. I hope it wasn't too rude.
Oh no, you're fine. I understand. Streaming is
You've been streaming for hours, Pig. Like, I'm totally not going to judge you. I'm actually snacking in the background. I just turned my camera off because one of the guys came in and I didn't want to capture them on video if they didn't want to be on video.
Yeah, my roommate's like that. She'll freak the fuck out if she was ever shown on video. She knows the kind of people that are after me.
In case you guys care, by the way, this is a vaporizer. There's herb in it. I'm in a lot of pain. I did something to my back while I was jogging.
I don't care. The only reason I don't smoke on camera is just because it's like ingrained in me, but like it's completely legal here.
Yeah, but this doesn't even look like weed. It looks like a vape.
Weed where I am is recreationally illegal, which means if you're found with a certain amount on you and you don't have like a medical marijuana card, you can get you can have like a felony amount for weed because it's Schedule 3, Schedule 1, I don't know, Schedule something drug.
It's Schedule 1 federally.
Yeah, so
which means that it just means no recognized medical use, which is stupid.
Yeah, so here in Florida, you can it can be a felony if you carry, I think it's like a gram or an ounce or more of weed. It's either a gram or an ounce. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But I am taking a trip to California in a month where I'll be visiting my girlfriend, so I might stream and smoke weed for the first time because I've never had it before there. Or I might end up visiting Vosh and smoking it there for the first time because it's also legal. But I want to stream it because I've never gotten high before. I've drank, but I've never gotten high, so I want to do it on stream.
If you come up here and visit Vosh, your bitch ass better get over here and come say hi to me because you and I don't live that far from each other, from what I understand.
Yeah, I might come visit you. Yeah, but I don't know when that'll be though because I'm spending all my money on visiting my girlfriend right now. But yeah.
Apologies for the background conversation, by the way. That is my boarder is currently like speaking sweet nothings to the rats.
So good.
For all of you from our regular audience that are curious, by the way, the baby rats are about half grown now, as far as we can tell. They're actually down here, so I can pop them over on camera when I turn it back on in a second. I'm finally done with my snack.
Yeah, I should be done eating as well. Yeah, I was just saying that because I've never smoked weed before. It's a good meme.
Well, I actually had a medical prescription for it for a long time.
Well, I used my ex-girlfriend's vape, but that was just nicotine. There was no like THC or weed or anything in it.
Legal weed is going to be your first weed. That's the right way to go. It's going to be strong. You're going to have a good experience.
Maybe, I don't know. Well, I might not the first time because from my understanding, you don't feel anything the first time usually.
I've seen people have different reactions. Yeah, some people feel nothing. Some people get high normally. I was too young to remember my first time. I did see one person have a panic attack when I was in high school. But that weed could have been laced with something. Like there was a lot of weed that was laced with shit.
Okay, you need to pace yourself, and you need to make sure that you're pacing yourself slowly because greening out, if you have any level of anxiety, is not very pleasant, especially if you're smoking a sativa.
Go sativa your first time. Don't go indica.
I don't have any like anxiety or anything, and from what I'm pretty sure, it's probably going to be like I'll either be at my girlfriend's house or I'll be at a good friend Vosh's house. It's legal. We're just chilling.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Not laced or anything. It should be probably the best possible experience you can have for your first time.
I'm hoping that when Vosh and I have,
you definitely got to stream that.
I'm hoping that when like Vosh and I end up going out for lunch, because we're just going to do a friend thing. That's probably not going to be a stream of any kind. But like when we do that, we were talking about maybe coming back to my place to smoke, just because it's legal in Washington and you can literally walk into a store. They're freaking everywhere to get it.
Yeah, we're still waiting for our stores to open.
Yeah.
So that reminds me, coming back to the stream topic, because we have a couple of people, there was a lot of like discussion of religion going on in the side chat, and that seems to have calmed down and people are actually talking about communism. Nuk, what is your, like, apart from you're concerned about people's attitudes and stuff, what would you say your biggest objection to communism is?
Well, I don't really have one. Like in theory, it's sound, but to me, and this could be a little bit of that capitalism that has been ingrained in me my whole life. To me, communism is a utopia society that I don't really see that the world is ready for, especially if you look at, on a universal level, and the fact that there's really never been a true communist society. Um,
Hmm.
Okay, well, no, that's not entirely true. There's never been a communist society that one would consider a state, but a lot of
yeah, a true
tribal
communist country.
societies, yeah, because a lot of tribal societies are actually communist,
I'm ready.
Yeah,
like
a lot of
native,
native tribes
particularly
were
a number of
somewhat
Native
communist.
American societies, could be considered communist in that, when somebody needs a home, the tribe comes together and they build it for them. If somebody is old or sick, they provide the meat and the food, etc. Everybody contributes to what they can.
But
Kids are usually raised communally.
there was
That is a form
somewhat
of
of a
communism.
class system in Native American tribes, though. If you were a warrior, you were somewhat above the rest of the tribe. If you were an elder, you were definitely above the rest of the tribe. If you
There's a
were a
distinct
chief, you
difference
were the
between
highest. If you were a
material.
shaman, you were like the second highest. So, I mean, there
Well,
was
there's
a
a difference between
hierarchy.
social capital and material capital, though. Like
Yeah.
in many of those systems, the chiefs didn't have that much physically more than the other groups in
Yeah.
terms of like physical goods. In
Yeah.
fact, a
True
lot of
that.
tribes would do potlatches where to show off your status, you would give a
Yeah.
bunch away.
The distinctions came in authority and control mainly.
Well, and even then, there were some tribes in which those chiefs didn't rule with any sort of iron fist. They just kind of helped make decisions like, are we going to go to war with another tribe?
Yeah,
They
but
would do
some
a trade
tribes did
negotiations.
have some pretty bad chiefs, and there were some pretty bad tribes. But I
But
overall
that's not
agree with you. I
saying that
think that
all
they're
of them
probably the
were.
best example, the closest that any society has come to communism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but especially when you have like the USSR giving it such a bad name, China giving it such a bad name.
Hmm.
These aren't true
Well,
communist societies. They claim to be communist, and now,
no, they're they're
yeah,
state-run market capitalist
yeah,
societies.
yeah,
Hmm.
and so the 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 enemies of communism will be able to latch onto that and use that stigma and that demonization, and you're pretty much done. I just don't think the world is ready for that yet. I think the world likes to be ruled. It's kind of sad. Because
Hmm.
we continuously go to these oligarchy systems. Like America was supposed to be different, and we're not. We're living under the oligarchy just like people have throughout history. We just have more shit now.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a few things I want to say for starters. So yeah, China and USSR were not true communism, and a lot of enemies of communism and socialism will use those as examples. I mean, even liberals do it. Destiny does it
Oh
all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Um, I would like to point out that generally the reason why communism, when you think of it, you usually think of the USSR and China, is because very authoritarian regimes are quick to call themselves communist or socialist because usually these regimes rise out of times of despair and hardship, right? So
The
Hitler
Nazi
rose to
Party is
power.
a
Yeah,
fantastic
yep. Mhm.
example.
Let me. All right. So Hitler rose to
Let's get
power.
the proletariat to fight for us, but then they install an authoritarian, often military dictatorship.
So what happened was socialism had become very popular with the German people in the 40s because Germany was very fucked up after World War One, suffering from a lot of debt, things like that. And so socialism became very, very popular. And the German National Socialist Party was like, yeah, socialism, cool. And on a surface level, it was very popular with the people. Unfortunately, Adolf Hitler was not pro-socialism. He was very anti-socialism. And so what happened was we found that this authoritarian dictator was put into power through popularity by the people who believed that who claimed that he was going to turn Germany into a beautiful socialist utopia, and it was going to be a powerhouse of the world. Didn't end up happening. Hitler ended up getting a lot of help and helping out corporations. He was a capitalist. He hated socialism. The night of the Long Knives, I think it was called, happened, where he ordered all of the actual socialists within the German National Socialist Party to be executed. And same thing goes for Mao's China.
And there were actual socialists in that party when it first rose to power, but the authoritarians killed them all. Also, Callan makes a good point. When any socialist or communist government is transitioning from a capitalist society, oftentimes an authoritarian hierarchy will be set up to aid in the transition. It's supposed to be a short-term thing until the populace has been prepared to, properly govern themselves effectively through anarcho-communist or anarcho-socialism or whatever structure you end up getting that isn't Marxist-Leninist or Maoist. But oftentimes, power-hungry people will come to power during that transitory period, and much like what happened with, Hitler and the German Workers' Party, and, eventually, like Marxist-Leninism was born, in Russia.
Yeah. So that's the thing.
Oftentimes those transitory states, the power will get to the heads of the leaders that get affected because, the kind of person who, would want a position of power is the kind of person who would end up working to keep it. And quite often when you have this sort of absolute power that you infuse in dictatorships, which is what both of those states were ultimately, then you end up with corrupt individuals that seize that power and they keep it. And that's the reason a lot of communist states fail, is because that transitory period, you never get past it. We've never actually seen a communist state, and I'm saying state here, like state/government, because again, there's been lots of cultures that operated that way.
But not a full-on state. Yeah. I definitely think it's part of it. And I also want to point out that for a dictator or for one person or a small group of people to maintain power over a dictatorial or authoritarian power over a state, socialism and communism can't be a thing. They are antithetical. Usually what will happen is not long after those figures are put into power, they will start getting help from businesses and corporations, and they will start doing favors for those businesses and corporations as well. And you're under an even bigger capitalist, late-stage capitalism.
Well, and oftentimes you need that help to come to power in the first place. Like one of the big things that Bernie was struggling with in the last election, and is struggling with a bit less now because of all the social capital he gained from the drama, was that because he didn't take big donors and because he hasn't been letting super PACs help him out either, he doesn't have the capital to get out there and combat the propaganda that's being made about him by the people who do. So if you are a person of principles who doesn't accept that help, particularly in a late stage capitalist society like the one that we currently live in, hey, we live in a society, go ahead and meet up the chat, guys. I just gave blanket permission. When you have that sort of problem, then not accepting that corporate help is a death sentence for getting elected. But on the other side of the coin, now you're being, by accepting help from the establishment, from those institutions, you have now, sold your soul to them, so to speak. You've got to repay back those favors before you can do anything, which is going to lead to needing more favors, which is going to lead eventually to complacency and seizure of power. Again, capitalism, the institutions that support it do a very good job because of the fact that money equals power, and you're trained from birth to think in those terms. They've done a very good job defending themselves from any change, which is why a lot of people who advocate for revolution, which you guys have heard my stance on here many, many times when it comes to revolution, but a lot of people, they do have something going for them when they say that the system is set up to resist slow incremental change, because this sort of power institution it takes one person, it takes half of Congress, it takes, a power dynamic shift even a little bit to erase things like, nationalized healthcare or stuff like that.
Yeah, so this is where I wanted to go. I wanted to add onto this because you said that you weren't sure if America or the world was ready for communism yet. I don't like that thought process, because that same thing has been said about a lot of things that nowadays we consider to be fundamental. People said that anyone who was against slavery back in when America was first founded was too much of an extremist, and that the world wasn't ready for no more slavery yet. They said the same thing about rights for gay people, rights for women, so on and so on. So I generally don't like that thought process. I think any massive change that we've gotten used to today was caused and influenced by extremists. The Stonewall riots are the reason why gay people have rights today. That involved violent political violence and rioting and property damage and stuff like that. Gay people wouldn't have rights today if it weren't for all that.
We actually talked about that on one of the very first streams I moderated on here. I don't remember if it was the one where I met Progressive Liberal for the first time. PL is brilliant, by the way, and despite the name of his channel, he's actually very close to being a communist. But that was the Antifa stream. We talked extensively about how, the use of violence in history in, civil rights type discussions and, defending yourself and all that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually agree. So when I say... I'm just not. When I say that, I'm not sure if the world is ready yet. So I look at what's going on in this country, and you spoke about it a little bit. Bernie Sanders is gaining again, and he's actually outperforming the rest of the Democrats when it comes to taking in donations, despite not taking big corporate donations. Taking really small donations.
He's broken records now 2 campaigns in a row for most individual donations that they've been given, averaging $18 per person. So he's getting tons and tons of tiny donations from people who could just barely spare a little bit.
But the corporations and the oligarchy are striking back from both sides, because not only do you have Donald Trump, who's raised more money than anybody in the history of this country, you have now Michael Bloomberg coming into the race, spending of his money and taking all of the time, not just from Bernie Sanders, but from everybody else. If I turn on my TV here in Michigan, in what is Trump country in Michigan, I don't even see Trump ads. I only see Bloomberg ads. That's all I see.
Yeah, I mean, so the issue is that reactionary ideology is always going to outnumber that of progressive ideology. This has always been the case. And the problem with that and the reason for that is that reactionary ideology... Yeah, I mean, reactionary ideology is what most people, I feel like, without any education or anything, would jump to immediately. Instant assumptions. And it requires, and to be progressive,
it's rooted in the status quo. It's reactionary ideology is I don't want change. It all boils down to I don't want change, or I want to get rid of the change that just happened, which is a lot of where you get the Nazi ideology and you get those sorts of things. Also, apologies. I just realized that my accent's coming back.
But when it comes to extremism, I actually agree. Because I think, and I had this conversation with Shay a while back when we talked about extremism, because I consider myself somewhat extremist, especially when it comes to particular issues. Like we were talking about guns earlier, and I kind of stayed silent. I am staunchly anti-gun. I'm very extreme when it comes to the gun issue. I'm very extreme when it comes to the abortion issue. I'm staunchly pro-choice. But I 100% agree, throughout history, massive change comes through extremism. And I don't think that this country alone will get to, complete socialism without some type of conflict, and violent conflict at that, us against them, because that's usually throughout history what it takes to shift ideologies that much. And that's just coming. I'm not sure exactly how conservative Florida is. I know that Florida gets a little crazy. I've seen all the YouTube shit.
All I'm gonna say is a couple days ago, I took my dog to get some laser therapy. She gets laser therapy at the doctor, and the vet asked me what I do for a living, and I said, I'm a cam porn star, because I thought it was preferable to saying I'm a leftist Twitch streamer that criticizes Trump regularly. I thought that was preferable. So that's
I see that insanity from the North Carolina people on my Facebook every day, and it's man, just Bernie socialist, communist, just so much fear mongering. And I'm to me, and that's why I get this impression, it's gonna take some generations. I hope that we get to a socialist state, because a communist state would be really hard. Because you're right, every time that somebody has tried to instill that communist state, the moment that first person bows to corruption, that communist state is over with, because it's so hard to achieve. I think that one day humanity will evolved to that, alley.
Well,
But
a properly run, communist state, so to speak. One.
if we had tight
Here's the
reins on a
thing, though. When
democratic
it
process
comes
to
to
elect the
clinging
leaders,
to
I think that's
things,
where people go wrong.
well, here's what's interesting, though. For one thing, part of the reason why corruption is such a big issue now is because through a good chunk of history, most of what we would consider countries or states they evolved from a feudalist system where some people had a lot and most people didn't. And so capitalism isn't very much different than feudalism. There's class mobility in the sense that a very rare exception can advance and people have the sort of perception of rights and freedoms and, and mobility. But in reality, it's a very, very low chance of anybody moving upwards or moving at all. And so we've had this sort of cultural thing where we've been trained to see the world in terms of haves and have nots, and in terms of your value and the value of what you do in terms of what you can have or what you don't have. If that's a very scarcity based mindset, it's a mindset you adopt when your basic needs have not been taken care of. If you were born into a communist society, an anarcho-syndicalist society, let's say, where things are proper, where your needs have been taken care of by the community since birth, education has been free since birth, everything is a system of voluntary contracts between you and your community. You directly get to see what your labor does for the community and what the community does for you. When you've grown up in that security your entire life, you're going to have a very different view of things like hoarding wealth or hoarding like material goods or things like that.
Oh yeah.
It might not even be a concept really, because healthcare is taken care of, food's taken care of, you've got a decent space. One of my favorite YouTubers did a series on what an actual communist society would look like based off of conquest of bread. It was wholesale sort of taken from that, but he illustrated the way that art would work and a whole bunch of other things just as a theoretical type idea. And when you start to try to put yourself in that headspace where these things have been taken care of from birth, where, say, if you got this yearning in your heart to play the piano or something, you could go join the Pianos Makers Guild and put in a certain number of hours, and then the piano would be yours. And everybody who has that, the capability to do that has an opportunity to. You start to understand that what to each according to their need, from each according to their ability, actually means. Because you've grown up in a society of scarcity where you could not trust your community to take care of things. In fact, you've been taught from birth that it won't, and that it's actually wrong for the community to do so, and that people who, live off the community are freeloaders and that sort of thing. And when you grow up with that attitude, it's very, very different than when you live the positive benefits every single day. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think that's the challenge there, is breaking people out of that mindset, because haves and have-nots have been the standard for so long. I mean, even look at like fantasy and sci-fi storytelling, you have the great man theory of history in action in your fiction. You've got your monarchs are often the subject of stories. Even fairy tales and fables, monarchs and the royals are often the subject of stories. Everybody else is nobody.
Oh yeah. Even in most fantasy books, the protagonist starts as a poor little nobody boy that becomes the ultimate ruler of the world, if not God, one of the gods themselves. I've read a lot of fantasy books, but yeah, I totally agree. So like, I am a complete secular humanist. That's like my worldview. So I think I'm actually naturally a communist. But like PigPuncher said, you just don't go around claiming to be a communist. I think that all human beings have merit equally. I think that you contribute to society by existing, and if we actually promoted a community or society that actually focused on what people are good at instead of forcing them into manual labor jobs or a class system or this oligarchy that we live in, I think that we'd have a much more productive system. I just think it's going to take a long time to get there, and I think it's going to take young people like PigPuncher staying or even growing more to the left and teaching their young people as they get older. Same with just this whole new rash, because it does seem like this whole new breadtube thing that I'm learning about now that I didn't know exist. It does seem like it's starting to take off, that there are more people getting the message out, and I would be all for it if there was a legitimate socialist or communist movement that had real fire in it. And I actually have maybe a little hope that AOC might spark that, because she goes a little bit more to socialism than most. She gets a little crazy sometimes, but that's my girl. but I think that it is in the future. It's just like my problem is like right now is I think Bernie Sanders is a great step, and if we can get him, then maybe we, like PigPuncher was saying earlier, maybe we can actually start having some real conversations about what is left, what is right. I would love to see a communist party in this country. I'd love to see a socialist party. I'd love to see. I
Oh,
told
Maynard
Ali
Saves is
a
in the
far
house.
right party. I would love all that shit.
Well, and I think that what's the final thing that I wanted to add that I didn't get a chance to, and Pig, I've had this kind of same shtick on your channel before when you and I were talking to somebody. But a lot of people ask, well, what would stop people from not contributing to the society? And I think that the answer is the same as what I just said. People inherently desire to move and to work and to better themselves. This is a core thing. When you end up in capitalism, a lot of the times, when you watch documentaries on things like homelessness, right? They talk about one bad day. You end up in the hospital injured so long that you lose your job, or a family member ends up having a heart attack and you get drowned in medical debt. Now you're homeless because you can't pay for your rent or whatever else. That happens over the course of months, but it's over the course of months that you'd go bankrupt, etc. All it takes is that kind of disillusionment or not being properly taken care of, when that happens, for you to end up from let's say middle class all the way to homelessness. And that constant risk, that fear, is always in the back of your mind. So you have an incentive as a worker, because you know that you are trading your labor, whether you know this in these terms or not, you're trading your labor to somebody else who's going to be making more money off of it. You don't have investment in that. Whereas if you're in a community that has cared for you since your birth, and you have seen the benefit of your labor, you're not just a cog in the machine making money for someone else. You see the direct benefit to your community from your labor, whether you're a doctor or a firefighter or producing some kind of consumer goods, or you're an artist or whatever. You get to directly see that day in and day out, in the same way that you get to see the direct results of your work as a content creator, as an independent artist. We are like the closest that you can get to right now, independent artists of some kind, to that sort of state. People talk a lot about creating art for fulfillment.
This is a whole new thing too. Like I honestly believe the future economy is digital. But I will give you just a quick short answer from North Carolina, and I'll give it to you as Earl. But without rich people, how are you gonna have any jobs? That's the first thing they say every goddamn time.
Well, and that's the funny thing, is this idea of, co-ops, basically, because it would start off with, most businesses being converted into co-ops, and eventually like landholders that have more than just say one family house, their property would be distributed, etc.
Well, I think the more people that are actually explaining these co-ops efficiently. So I will be honest. So you guys pretty much won the debate, but I was already there just because I had started actually watching a little bit of PigPuncher the first time he was supposed to come on the show. I've been watching Vosh. There's things that Vosh has said that I don't agree with, but a lot of what he says, I'm sitting there nodding my head, and I'm like, kick that motherfucker's ass, and so like I have been sold that because a lot of my perception has been formed by that America that I grew up in.
America.
America. So when I do see that these movements are popping up and people are being more vocal and people are getting actual real followings behind them, then I do have hope that maybe it is possible. Maybe the narrative can turn. But they're really good at the narrative on the other side. And I think that our side needs to get better at the narrative, and more people seem to be. So I do have hope.
Okay, so now you officially need to change the name of this stream when we are done to PigPuncher and Leakai Breadpilled Nakasuchi, because guess what? You are officially a card-carrying communist.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, I was already pretty much there anyway. Like I said, I get pretty extreme, so I try to contain it, because we talk about religion, and people don't like it when I talk politics. I usually lose subs.
Well, I mean, you just need to find your niche. And honestly, you just got brought over a whole bunch of folks from PigPuncher's stuff. And if they like to stick around, then you're going to have another audience for your political things. So if you're worried about our core audience, ditching off, we have a bunch of people who, if they're enjoying
I will be
the
having
discussion,
a
might
pretty
stick around.
interesting political debate coming up.
Which reminds me, did
Steven.
you get a chance to invite PL on to talk about Iran? Because we talked about that.
Not yet, because like I've been trying to work it out with sock account. So like once I get this nailed down with sock account, I got modern day debate tomorrow, and then I got to reach out to the Steven dude. I got to respond in email to praise I am that I am, so we can come and I'm gonna go on his channel and we're gonna talk about all the shit I've been talking about him. That's gonna be great. But after I do all of that, probably Sunday or Monday, I'm gonna reach out to Mikey and Progressive, and we'll talk Iran, and it'll be a nuanced conversation because I've got a lot of information.
Oh, I've actually got some new information on the plane that crashed as well, because my husband works for Boeing, so we get information on that stuff all the time. And it turns out it looks like Boeing's stock got a jump today because it came out that a missile hit that plane and that it appears to be an Iranian missile.
Yeah,
Wait, where was that?
In the Iraqi airport, a 737 jet exploded partially after taking off a couple of days ago. Iran was refusing to give the black box to investigators from other countries because of the recent scandal involving the general getting killed.
That's what I'm saying.
And it came out today. Originally, Ukraine, which it was a Ukrainian company. Ukraine originally tweeted out that it appeared to be an engine failure, but the thing is the pilot didn't actually he didn't actually reach out to anyone. Like, he didn't flag that there was an emergency or anything, which would be strange because the guy, was an extremely experienced pilot and had been driving, he'd been piloting that particular type of plane for some time. And on top of it, it was within about 5 minutes of takeoff that it went into flames. And if you know anything about engineering for jets, you'll know that one engine on fire, even if it explodes and the shrapnel causes damage to the plane, one engine on fire is actually not going to take a plane down. There's redundancies upon redundancies to keep that plane in the air. So at the very least, you can try to glide it in somewhere to land and get help from a control tower. This just burst into flames and exploded. And then Iran being all dicey about the black box and saying they were going to turn it over, there was a big deal. So it actually, breaking news today, came out that Boeing found that a missile had hit the plane, and it was most likely an Iranian missile. So it looks like they tried to make it look like the U.S. bombed a Iraqi plane. And that would have majorly messed with Boeing as well.
I think I saw that it might have been an act. At least Iran might be saying now that it was an act. I'm not sure where I heard it, but it was like a misfire. They didn't mean to shoot it down. Some shit. I don't know. This whole thing is crazy.
The big thing the reason why I was curious is I got a flight to take in a month. Holy shit! Did this happen?
No, this is over in Iraq.
Okay.
The plane was taking off from Baghdad.
Whew. Well, okay, just making sure. Oh.
Anytime that escalation happens with the Middle East, I get a little weary of getting on airplanes. But I was. Oh God,
we've got Dead City in the chat with modest proposal. Okay, Dead City. I love Jonathan Smith. I love Swift as much as the next guy. But come on.
Alrighty. I have the big question. Have you guys tackled flat earthers yet?
We actually have had a couple of flat earthers get ganged up on during some of our dumpster fire streams. There are flat earthers in the Christian community that hate knock.
Yeah. We always find out inadvertently, and then we're like, "Oh shit, flat Earth time."
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of flat Earth debunked videos lately, and God, I really can't believe the kind of stuff flat earthers believe. They don't believe that they don't demonize science. They believe they're scientists. They try to use the scientific method. They think they're they're onto something. So I can at least appreciate that. But I'm going to be taking apart probably just one to start with, flat Earth videos on stream. See if I can get their attention and maybe see if I can't get them. Debate a few of them on stream. I really, really want to debate some flat earthers. I think it'd be a fun time.
Well, speaking
Yeah.
of alternative ideologies, did you hear about the self-funded anti-vax study that conclusively proved that autism is not caused in any way, shape, or form by vaccines? Like, this was kind of the most hilarious and ironic thing. They funded, like, they raised thousands upon thousands, millions of dollars, and crowdfunded a anti-vax study to prove conclusively that vaccines cause autism, and it found the opposite.
Hmm.
There was so much rage.
That's like the
Yeah.
Koch brothers study on universal health care. And their study actually came, of course, they're trying to prove that it costs more than the current system, and their study actually shows that it costs less. I love that study. It's one of my favorites.
What I really want to see happen one day is for space travel to become accessible to most people, so that anybody could just take a plane up into the stratosphere to see the curvature of the Earth. I want to see what flat earthers would do then. I wonder if they would say that the windows are like
It's all a
projecting
conspiracy.
screens or
People aren't
something.
really doing it. I mean, it's just a
Yeah.
conspiracy. It's NASA conspiracy, just like Australia.
I mean, a lot of yeah. I mean, actually, a lot of flat earthers claim that if there's a flight, like a one, just no stops, just one way flight, that doesn't make sense in the flat Earth model, but makes tons of sense in the globe model, they'll say that it's a fake flight, just doesn't actually exist. So that's when I have this policy where I don't waste my breath on what I deem to be bad faith actors. If there is somebody who very
Yeah,
obviously is
that's my
not
life.
interested in the truth, that's when I just say, "All right, I'm just gonna I'm gonna mute you on Twitter. I'm not gonna give you attention. I'm gonna ban you in my chat. I'm just not gonna give you attention." Like somebody, a lot of the woke scold types I deal with on Twitter. I don't know if you've heard that term before. A lot of them I consider to be bad faith. I just mute them and
I'm learning the new terminology.
So woke
Yeah,
scolds
I'm
are
learning
the
it.
sort that you know the video that was done recently on cancel culture and stuff.
like
Yeah,
ContraPoints.
ContraPoints. Yeah,
Yeah, woke scolds are basically the kind of people that dogpiled onto her. They're
Yeah,
folks that will, take a story about something that somebody did and morph it into an attack on their character, and then turn that into a fact statement and harass and harangue. Basically they gamergate, people that they decide to cancel.
that's actually a good analogy. Actually, they do basically gamergate them. Um,
I mean, Gamergate was basically like the first cancellation, right? Like it was
yeah.
destroying Zoe Quinn's life, and then it turned into let's destroy the life of any social justice person in the gaming industry because we're white men and we have a right to it.
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
But so whenever I find someone to just be completely in bad faith, that's when I give up on them. But I like to think that most flat earthers are probably good faith, or at least they're reasonable people that are just like unbelievably misinformed.
Maybe most of them. Like, I would definitely not recommend Nathan Thompson. You don't want to talk to that dude. He's a douche.
Is he the guy that Nathan Thompson? Why do I recognize? I've been watching a
He's
lot of
like one.
flat Earth debunking.
He has like one of the biggest Facebook flirfer groups there is, and he's been on Non Sequitur show recently on Modern Day Debate. He often asks for money to debate him. Yeah, he's that kind of dude.
Jesus Christ! I've got double his subscriber count. He's not going to ask me for money to bait him. What the hell?
He's got like this. Like, people say that I'm conceited, but
Ego.
he's got this fucking ego.
What the? I'm
Oh,
looking at
guy
his
drives me
thing right now.
crazy.
He's got 10.7K. I'm at 19K. Listen, if someone
Oh,
challenges me to a debate and they have more subs than me, I'm not turning it down for the world. Okay. Like,
yeah, I don't really like. I walk into debates that I have no idea. I just found out the person that I'm debating tomorrow is Mika Popov. We're debating, does salt prove the existence of God? And I'm like, fuck it, James, I'll debate. So I've got to kind of come up with some arguments. But I just found out it's Mika Popov who's been trying to talk to me for a while. Like, so I am used to bad faith actors. This is pretty much all I deal with when I deal with Christians. Um, Sadly, I think a lot of internet Christians are just not really Christians. They're just bad faith actors. But I most famously It was Matt Powell Cupcake. I still deal with that
I
guy.
mean, don't know true Scotsmen the Christians. Christianity is an identity like anything else. But what they might be is they're using their religion to promote some shitty ideologies that they
Well,
believe
I'm
in.
just
So that's the
the
kind
Christians that I've had on my channel. Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like they're not. I don't think that they're like a good representation of Christianity. The Jills of the world.
That's a better
Matt Powell.
statement than
Yeah.
I don't think they're Christians, because they're probably Christians. They identify themselves as Christians,
Well,
but
Sky
they're
Out, I
not good
think it's.
examples of
I'm
Christianity.
still definitely pretty sure that Sky Out's a Poe.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that Sky Out is a Poe. His like religious degree was obviously fake, and we proved that in Discord. And on top of it, he doesn't seem to know anything about the Bible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But Jill's like
Same as
he's
yours.
a nationalist, so you probably have some fun with Jill. Maybe PigPuncher. I don't
Oh
know.
no, I watched Vosh debate Jesus is Lord. I would probably actually kill myself on stream in front
I
of
sat
everybody
there.
doing that.
I watched that debate, and I'm like, Vosh doesn't know who he's talking to.
He will not talk to female people. Like, he was going to get into a debate with Naka, and he's on the bitch made shirt because he bitched out because I was the moderator.
Oh yeah, I literally in streams like he would mute people that were women, and they couldn't hear him, and he couldn't hear them.
Yeah.
And
Somebody that's an example of somebody who the best thing they can do for the world is just to die. Like I'm sorry.
In Minecraft.
In Minecraft, because I don't want to get you banned, but like that's the level we're at. Like
we're trying to kill him at least in live chats. More and more atheists are just banning him from live chats, not letting him do his trolling thing. You know,
all right, hey, from a few of ours, can I get a Hail Priapus in chat? We need to get the new PigPuncher folks associated with the memes. So people are talking about same as yours. Same as yours is one of them, and Hail Priapus is anybody. It separates those who hang out in the voice chats from those who do not.
Same as yours. Yeah, that was Sky Out, right?
Be on a shirt. Yes, that was Sky Out. What is your definition what is your definition of a person versus a being? Same as yours.
Yeah. It's so brilliant. Like Dragnaut Silvis is really good at getting Christians exactly where he wants to go, and that's the other thing. Like if you think like flurfers just kind of look at science and kind of twist it, young Earth creationists and they take it to a whole new level, and they love me for some reason. And I'm like, I'm not even like an evolutionist. I'm not a person that likes to have those evolution debates, but every single creationist wants to come and talk to a raging atheist about evolution.
It's really because funny. You were in that documentary.
I know, and it's so stupid.
Documentary. So Pig, a little bit of a history lesson on Naka. One of the ways that he actually figured out there even was an atheist community on YouTube was because an NIFB person by the name of Matt Powell made a documentary called Science Falsely So Called, in which he heavily edited footage of himself meeting up in person with Naka after having sabotaged his cameras to make it look like he had debated Naka and Naka had done absolutely terribly and had even cried afterwards. Like, they edited footage of him having a headache to make it look like he was crying.
That was the modern day debate, and they edit footage from the after show. Well, first they edited footage of when I was did get a little teary-eyed and I was talking about the death threats on my daughter. They edited that footage and said that was during the debate while I was crying, or that they made me cry. And so when I called them out for that, then they changed it and they actually used footage from the debate, and I was literally laughing, and they said I was crying. But yeah, the interesting thing about the movie was, like, he thought, they tried really hard to sabotage my camera, and they did. But I recorded most of it on my phone. And there's a beautiful moment when Matt realizes that, and it's perfect. And he still went on to be deceptive and deceitful. And I have what I have of the conversation in full, uncut. I let the audience decide who won the conversation. If you watch the movie, I look like a fucking idiot. I'm not going to lie.
And that ended up leading Aaron Ra to criticize you, and for Suris and his panel reviewing the science falsely so-called to kind of discover your existence. And you ended up getting, a whole bunch of folks from the community who came in to try to give you tips on how to debate and other things. And, that's how the full story eventually came out. But that's kind of how you came to be a part of the atheist community.
Yeah, I'm another example of getting better with it as I go. I think you just learn as you go. Like I was really bad at it when I first started, when I first stumbled into to debating people. I'm getting there, I think.
I I watch a lot of debates in my free time. Basically, all my free time, I'm either uploading videos or debating people. So I've gotten pretty. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm good with my rhetoric, but I feel like I have a response to basically everything someone could throw at me. And if I lose a debate, or which I haven't done in my opinion in a long time, I think I lost quite a few debates when I first started doing this. There was this guy. Oh my god, I'm not even gonna get into it. But I feel like if I lose
it on purpose one time.
I feel like I'm sorry, God, I'm so tired. My my throat gets like clogged when I'm tired.
We'll be wrapping it up soon, Pig. I know you've been doing this for like all day.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing a Discord unrecorded after show tonight, by the way, guys. So for those of you that are members of our Discord, if you're not yet, it is password protected. You have to read through the rules and find the password in the rules and put it in the bottle, take your read the rules thing away, and then you can enter into the rest of the chat. But for those of you that we're doing an unrecorded after show tonight. Pig, you're invited if you're not too tired to like sit up straight by the end of this.
I'm going to bed right after. I actually need to edit one more video, set it to upload in the morning, and then I'm going to bed.
Yeah, the work never stops.
Yeah, I upload daily and I stream like every 2 or 3 days at least. But like I was saying, I did this to like anytime I lose a debate, in quotes, I feel like that's probably a good thing at the same time because then I know what I need to learn more about. But usually when I consider myself having lost a debate, last time I think I lost a debate in quotes would probably be my debate with just some random chud that I pulled in from chat actually. He wanted to debate on whether or not Trump was good, and I don't consider like he didn't out debate me, but he just wouldn't accept that the scientific community agrees that climate change is real and man-made climate change is a problem. He just kept saying, "Yeah, but they claimed that it was actually going to be an ice age back in the 70s," and I was like, "They did, yeah, but that's like it was a very small contingent of scientists that said that, and." The scientific community unanimously agrees on this now, and I just couldn't get it through this guy's head.
And the technology back then was nothing like it is today.
Yeah, so I basically considered that a debate lost because I just wasn't able to get through to that guy, and I ended up having to ban him just because he. I did manage to breadpill him on trans rights, if I remember correctly, but in terms of climate change, I couldn't get him to believe it. But then from there, I knew what to look up last night. I knew the questions I need to be able to answer. Like, okay, so. Did scientists really think that there was going to be a massive ice age 30 years ago? Oh, turns out they didn't. It was like 3 of them that did. That wasn't actually the case. It's really just a thing that's overblown by conservatives. And so now I'm better at debating that topic now. So even if I lose a debate, I consider that a win because now I'm going to be better at debating that topic again.
Oh, yeah. And that's why, I often say, I try to surround myself by smarter people, and then I have these big rooms of people that are smarter than me, and they talk about all these things and I learn. It's I've gotten better and better with my rhetoric. Tomorrow's debate, does salt prove the existence of God? That's really weird, and I think James likes me for these really weird debates because I have these things that are part of my heritage that just make all of these weird facial expressions. So when I come across the crazy, my face shows it. So tomorrow's the salt prove the existence of God. No, I won the debate, but now I'm finding out it's Misha Popov who has had some issues with honesty. So this is going to end up being very interesting. But I don't even really know how I'm going to go into this debate because I'm like, fucking salt.
Yeah, I mean, is the argument going to be God turned
I
Lot's
have
wife
no
into a pillar
idea.
of salt, so that's where salt comes from.
Like the first time this guy reached out to me, he wanted to talk about like how Freddie Mercury didn't think that gay marriage should like gay people should be able to get married or some shit. Like I can't even remember. It was something about Freddie Mercury, and it was just like a weird topic. Like why you want to talk about these really weird topics? You know, like, and now it's salt. The salt proved the existence of God. So. I do have somebody that's going to tell me or has shown me where I need to go to kind of find out what I'm going to be dealing with tomorrow. So I'm going to be looking at that tomorrow. It's going to be interesting.
I'm just extremely curious to find out how salt proves the existence of God.
Yeah.
What is salt like? What's it composed of? Wait, is salt itself?
Sodium chloride.
Sodium chloride. Yeah. So sodium and chloride. Like I'm wondering how's a basic covalent bond?
Well,
Explain
that's specifically table salt, though. When you use the term salt in science, salt actually can refer to a number of different crystalline precipitates from a number of
soluble in water. Yeah.
Yeah, so it can actually define a lot of different substances. So if you start talking about that, like you can probably throw a rougher game immediately just by talking about, well, which salt are you talking about? Because I take amphetamine salts every day, aka Adderall, to help with my ADHD. Does that prove the existence of God? Like, which salt are we talking about here? And if you're specifically talking about table salt, are you talking about refined table salt or rock salt or... There's a lot of insanity that you could get into. Like, getting into the nuances of definitions, you can tear somebody apart.
Like, I'm glad I finally am going to have a reference point, and I'm going to go watch this debate that he had, I guess, on this issue. But, yeah, like, to me, it's like, I love these debates. Like, you're making the claim, now you've got to prove it somehow. Most likely, it'll be along the lines, I don't think Misha really works with slides, but it'll be apologetics and somehow... trying to make things what they're not, because that seems to be what the Hovens and those do. But I'm gonna actually get to find out about this guy now, so I'm not gonna go in completely blind.
Over on my other channel, we actually did a very rambling and long stream on comparative mythology, and we actually talked about Kingetto's debate with Praise I Am, where he tried to equate the biblical story of Samson with the myth of Heracles and say that Heracles was stolen from the Bible, which is kind of hilarious if you know anything about either of those stories. So one of the things we talked about was creating connections that are very surface level and then ascribing a great deal of meaning to that. So, like, when we talked about mythological comparisons, we talked about, say, snake myths from multiple different giant snake slaying myths. So we talked about Apep from the ancient Egyptians, where they thought that Ra would kill him when he went underground. We talked about Jormungandr. We talked about, what was the other one? Apollon slaying the giant python at... crap, I just lost it. At the Oracle of Delphi, and that entire myth. And we talked about how even though these are all serpent-slaying myths and you can draw comparisons, they each have a very different cultural significance and mythological meaning. And so even though you have the serpent-slaying myths that, many of those cultures are said to have descended from Proto-Indo-European, they have different cultural significance and different meanings. So just because they all have the serpent slaying myth doesn't mean that it all means the same thing. It doesn't mean that there's this common heritage specifically of thematics, for example. And so I think you start to get that from apologists when they start to play with science. They do these very surface level comparisons. Well, like one of the ones I heard in my church growing up, because that, like for those of you that are part of the regular audience, you've heard me tell the stories about the very, very conservative, fundy church that I went to. One of the things that they used to say was, there are seashells and fish bones on mountaintops, so the flood happened. The fossil record supports creationism.
Oh yeah, I ran into that argument with Matt Powell.
And so, like, if you have a very surface level understanding of, there's shell fossils at the top of a mountain, then out of context, that sounds like it could be drawn in comparison. But then when you start to read well, it's been encased in rock because it's existed for millions of years and human fossils don't exist during that period of time, and yada, yada, yada. Like, you start to learn about rock strata and things like that. When you get more than just a surface level understanding, when you add context, it no longer supports. But you deal with people who deal mostly in oversimplification, and that's how these apologists make their arguments. Like Matt Powell did it to you when he asserted, do you believe that life came from non-life? Even though my snarky response to him is, well, doesn't the Bible say that? I mean, God made man from dust, and dust is not alive. So your Bible is the one that says that life came from not life, whereas, like, life perpetuated itself. That is what
Well,
the abiogenesis theory effectively says, that it was, that compounds that look like life came together, and then when life came into being, so to speak, from those chemical reactions, it perpetuated itself.
yeah, I really hate anytime I'm debating somebody and I realize they're religious and their religious beliefs like or what hinge a lot of their beliefs, that's when I'm like, fucking shit. Do I like it's literally a meme in like the leftist debate community, like, okay, so now I have to falsify the Christian God before we can discuss whether or not black people should be enslaved. Like, Jesus Christ. That's usually I know I'm probably not supposed to say this, but I consider most like hardline religious people who like the evangelicals and like the Baptist people that like use their beliefs to justify their bigotry and stuff like that. I consider those people to just be beyond reaching.
Oh, they pretty much are. They are. They're set in
a
their
lot
ways.
of them have been indoctrinated for their whole lives,
Yeah, and it's exactly why, like, my channel where I really stayed away from politics, because it's atheism. I talk about religion. But it's just come to the point now that religion and politics have become mingled. And I think that you really got to expose that people are using their religious beliefs to dictate their politics. And if you can somehow get them to recognize that, then maybe they'll start to change. But I'm not even positive that with that they'll really want to change themselves, because they're so dug into that ideology.
Well, and I'm living proof that you can be extremely religious and extremely spiritual and not, like, dump that into your politics. Like, most people don't even know that I'm a pagan unless they've either hung out on this channel long enough to hear me express things from a pagan perspective, or, if they've asked me or it came up somehow. Because I was, like, I think it came up on Pig's channel because there was some chud that I was helping him deal with, because I happened to be hanging out in the chat at the time. And the guy asked me if I was a believer, and my response was, yes, but I think your God is a jerk and I worship different ones. And that's how Pig's channel found out I'm a pagan.
Well, yeah, and it's a definite thing.
But my point
people
is
are
that
dug
I'm
in
both
their
pagan
ideology.
and believe that religion doesn't belong in politics. I would not want to be under a pagan government any more than a Christian one. Because I think that the moment you put religion into government, it can be used to oppress the people, and I don't think that's okay.
Yeah, and we have an administration that placates to the hard right evangelical base, so it is intermingling, and you're right. Like, when your religious beliefs become your political beliefs, then you pretty much can't change them. You have to deconvert them before you can even change their political opinions, and then you can't have a fair political argument at that point. One side's open to the argument, the other side just isn't. But I think we should probably wrap this up. I know Pig is tired. PigPuncher's tired. I promised an after show, and it's almost 11. But we'll let you wrap it up in your own way, Allie. So I know you was about to say something.
So, I know that a lot of our fan bases overlap, but right after I'm done sort of giving our outro, Pig, you'll get a chance to plug your channel for our folks who haven't heard of you or seen you before.
Link is
I
in
know
the description.
that a lot of link is in the description for one. Snock's actually been a good boy. So he's notorious for not adding things until you go back and look at the VOD. So for folks who are curious about the new series that we're launching, Film Crusade, Knock and I are going to be meeting on Sunday to talk over the intro video. We're going to be doing some film theory and script theory so that you guys can we're going to relate it all to the structure of the first movie in the series so you can kind of see the terms we're talking about. But we wanted to be able to make an intro video on film theory, or specifically script writing theory and storytelling theory, so that when we use terms like, the first pinch point or the second plot point, or, this, that, or the other arc, or this, that, or the other quartile, And when we're talking about those things, you'll have a, very basic foundation as to why that particular timing for that scene is significant, why that makes it important to the theme of the movie, what sort of feeling this section is supposed to have. So Nuck and I are working on that. A few of you have seen the title card that I made for the first official episode of the Star Wars segment. I'm planning on using that program to do intro segments in the title cards in the style of whatever movie that we're watching, if it has a signature style. So that's going to be a lot of fun, but we're hoping to get the first 3 episodes of Film Crusade done before we start posting. So expect that in maybe 2 to 3 weeks, assuming that Knox's schedule doesn't get super busy, so we can get all of the collaborative script writing and stuff together. And so I can learn editing, because yours truly is going to be doing the editing for this series. I just invested in a new workstation PC that has, I've got a 16-core processor in it, among other things, so I'm pretty dang happy with it. But it does what I need it to do. It took me like a minute and a half to render the 11 seconds of 1080p 60 frames footage. So we're hoping to increase the production values. Nuck and I have been talking about a couple of other series that we want to launch sometime in the next coming months. The Patreon rollout is coming. Patrons just actually got an exclusive behind the scenes video, not published today. And we're going to be updating all of the descriptions to reflect the raffles that'll be going on for the higher tier patrons. And some of the new benefits that are going to be going on for the lower tier patrons. Nock is working on the design for the t-shirts also, for those of you who are patrons as of January 1st when he woke up. So those are going to be coming, we're going to hope by April, May, when I get to go out to Michigan and we meet up, we're going to sign them all and he's going to get them all shipped out. So for those of you that were patrons by January 1st, your rewards are coming pretty soon. But yeah, those are the big things. Callan and I over on Sticks and Stonehenge, we are working on, we are going to be recording tomorrow our responses to Spirit Science. So those are going to be coming out over the next 2 or 3 as well. The first one we're going to be doing is Tiamat is not a Sumerian god, because that's they did a Sumerian epic in their own style and it pissed Callan off. So Callan and I are going to be talking about that. The second video is going to be called Iron is Not a Macronutrient, because it's fucking not, Spirit Science. It isn't. I don't care if you say some people call it that. It's not.
I watched Vosh go over a Spirit Science video, and I actually was surprised that people believe that. But then again, there's Scientologists and there's flat earthers and there's I hate the internet.
So, for all of you, those are the big updates for Knock and I's channel and for Sticks and Stonehenge. Obviously, Sokka's going to be, we're hoping that Sokka will be here on Friday or Saturday. We're also hoping to do a talk with Progressive Liberal and Mikey from the Progressive Liberal channel on Iran sometime this weekend. And of course, on Sunday, Knock and I are going to be taking down the Matt Powell's newest movie the next 10 minutes and hope that he gets to a new point other than faith versus works for salvation, because he's been on that for about 20 minutes and we're both getting bored.
Yeah, mass boring. I am gonna start up again with edited videos next week. So that's my only announcement. Right now I'm gonna go with 2 edited videos a week. I might go up to 3 edited videos a week, but right now edited videos will be on Tuesdays and Saturdays. So edited videos 2020 will be coming back to the channel.
So, Pig, you want to feel free to plug your channel?
I don't have much to plug. My name is PigPuncher. You can find me on YouTube, all one word, all caps. I also have a website. If you're going to watch me live, you can go there, pigpuncher.com/live. That's where everyone chills and hangs out. And yeah, follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well. If you want, you can find links to those in the descriptions of my videos. And other than that, that's about everything.
Pig is being far too humble. Again, he is one of the kindest, most considerate people that I have met in the community. He is the reason that I am here in front of you all, because he started the chain of events that led me here. So, if you haven't checked him out already, if you somehow have managed to exist in our Discord without ever going and seeing his channel, please fix that immediately. He has some fantastic content. He's a lot of fun to watch, especially when he's angry and or uninstalling League for the 5th time.
Yeah. I reinstalled it. I reinstalled it, Leakai. New League of Legends cinematic came out today. I reinstalled it.
That's why I stay away
Well,
from video games now.
I need to hop onto your channel again, and we need to game together and have some fun. And you need to pretend that you can jumble with Ash some more and
All right,
let me laugh.
listen here. All right, I might stream a little bit tomorrow. Fuck, what day is it? Shit, I have D&D on Monday. Okay, probably tomorrow night. I will stream some League of Legends. Okay, we will play some League together.
All right, so that sounds like a lot of fun, honestly. Just make sure you give me a message and get time squared away and stuff, because I've got commitments to do some recording tomorrow, so I have to wait until after I'm done working. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. It's been a long time in the making, and I know the community was looking forward to it. Nock is officially a card-carrying communist. Nock needs to change the name of this video to Nock Gets Breadpilled. I know that you were most of the way there, but you know what? You can say it loud and proud. You are officially a communist at this point.
Yeah,
Now-
we'll continue the conversation. This was our first real time, I think, talking politics, Allie.
Yeah, well, specifically political theory. Yeah, this is our first time talking political theory.
I would say
we talked a little bit about it in the Golden Meme stream, because I got into that discussion about tolerance and virtue ethics.
I will say, as we're closing out, like, seriously, if you're a new progressive, if you're new to politics, you don't quite know where you fall on the spectrum yet, definitely go check out PigPuncher, check out Vosh, check out a lot of different people. See what you agree with, what you disagree with. Find out what you want.
Thought Slime, non-compete. Okay, here's your lefty starter pack. Thought Slime, non-compete. I'd say H-Bomber Guy is technically part of Left Tube.
Oh, he absolutely is.
Like ContraPoints, Philotube.
Yeah, I like ContraPoints.
PigPuncher and Vosh, if you like watching people, like fight chuds, because like if you want your ideas broken down, Pig and Vosh are fantastic. They both do a great job with responding to videos. They have that sort of gravitas, like Pig's been very reserved on this stream, but he's very bombastic and energetic on his a lot of the time.
To be fair, I'm very tired.
His audience.
I yell at my chat. I get real mad at my chat.
Yeah,
so
he's not familiar with the channel, because I'm rage, so I do tend to rage.
Yeah, like Naka jokingly gets called the Vosh of the atheist world, because he's the one who will get into fights with even the lowest common denominator in order to prove a point.
Oh yeah, I will rush into that fight.
Mad Blender, somebody else mentions in the chat, and like I would also put 3 arrows on that list. So if you want your lefty starter pack, you want to learn more about communism, particularly if you want to learn more about the alt-right pipeline, the Pewdie Pipeline series of videos in the response, and the alt-right playbook series of videos in response. Google both of those. And I believe, was it Non-Compete that also did the series on what an actual communist society would look like?
Yep, it was Non-Compete. It was how an anarchist society would actually function. It was a series.
Yeah, so those are some great
check
videos to check out if you're still figuring out your politics, and if you want to kind of look at more in-depth examinations of some of these arguments.
Yeah, I'm glad there's places for people to go.
Innuendo Studios is another one I missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Innuendo Studios made the alt-right playbook. For you, Nakasuchi, I would recommend really want to check out Non-Compete's video about how an anarchist society would actually work. It's basically how a communist society would work. It's explained very well. It's he uses Legos, like Lego characters, like stop motion animated, to sort of show like a visual of what's going on. It's very well made. It's very entertaining. It's part of a whole series, and it was very eye-opening for me.
I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. Hopefully you'll come on again in the future. I'm gonna have like a Trumper come on sooner than later. I think it's gonna be fun. But we are gonna get out of here. It's 11:06. Thank you so much, PigPuncher, for coming on. We have about a 30-second closing, so it's not too long, and then we'll be off air. But until next time, y'all, be the conversation, and I will see you soon.